Hello and welcome to TAO Talk, conversations from our ecosystem. TAO, short for Together as One, is the only social media platform that cannot sell out by design. It will eventually be autonomous, governed by its users, and all profit will be reinvested into the community. We're on track for a closed beta this month, April 2025. And in the spirit of community and connection, TAO Talk is where we speak with thinkers, founders, and builders within the TAO ecosystem. Because this is more than a social media app, it is a movement. We're on the precipice of great change in our world, and there are so many of us working to create this better, brighter, decentralized, democratized world in which the power is returned to the people. Which brings me to our guest today. Matt Martensen is the founder of User Cooperative, a first of its kind browser startup structured as a user owned and governed tech cooperative. With 15 years of experience spanning Wall Street, Silicon Valley, and international markets, Matt brings deep experience in internet technology, corporate finance, and M&A to the table. A Yale MBA and Rutgers trained finance professional, Matt has held leadership roles across high-growth startups and legacy institutions. Prior to founding User Co-op, he served as an entrepreneur in residence at Google for Startups in London and advised executives at Shopkick, a tracks company, on strategic growth. Rooted in the belief that users should own the platforms they power with their data and attention, Matt is building a browser that flips today's tech economy on its head. Part REI, part Chrome, User Cooperative puts ownership and governance in the hands of its members, not venture capitalists. Originally from San Antonio, Matt now lives in Durango, Colorado, where he also works as an accountant to help bootstrap the venture and inspire the next generation of builders. Matt, I'm so glad you're here today. Hello.
Thank you very much for having me, Kiara.
So let's start from the top. What is User Cooperative and what makes it different from a traditional tech company?
User Cooperative is a user-owned web browser startup that is uniquely structured as a consumer cooperative, and our mission is to just simply start putting tech power and profits into the people's hands. So I would say that what makes us different is that we are the first of our kind, as you mentioned, and that consumer cooperative structure is key. And you also mentioned that we're kind of mashing together an REI and a Chrome to build our business, or at least to start. That is unique. I have yet to see another business that's structured this way. And a consumer cooperative, when you think of an REI, and I'm not sure how familiar listeners are to REI and how it's owned and controlled, but a consumer cooperative is basically a customer-owned business, and that's what REI is. So we've simply just kind of taken that REI consumer ownership, that customer ownership portion, and have adapted that to a web browser business to create User Cooperative.
So for people who aren't particularly tech or business savvy, what would you say the benefits of a cooperative structure are?
Well, the benefits of the cooperative structure, they enable tech power and profits to flow to the people for the very first time. And so when we say that benefits, power and profits, okay, so I think in this day and age, it's generally understood that tech is a very powerful engine for creating change, or just really it's a huge actor in this system that we're party to these days. And it's also, when you think of them from a profitability standpoint, technology systems today are trillion dollar. They have enterprise values of trillions of dollars. We see big tech, for example, everything from Apple to Microsoft, all having these massive valuations that are ultimately built on our activity, consumer activity on these platforms. And so I think that we have there's a tremendous upside here. Right now, we can all look around and see that these trillion-dollar valuations, and then we're also kind of seeing on the horizon this artificial intelligence, general artificial intelligence that's coming around the corner. And I one of the things that I think one of the crispest definition of general artificial intelligence is by OpenAI, the maker of ChatGPT, and they define general artificial intelligence, which is what they're building, as highly autonomous systems that outperform humans at most economically valuable work. And so, if you say, well, what is the value of the work that we're creating today? I'd say the proxy for that is global GDP, which I think is around, we're looking at $170 trillion per year. of global GDP. And if they say most of that is going to fall under their autonomous systems, then we can say that that ultimately, on an annual basis, we're looking at huge value. And so, if we start at kind of putting tech power and profits into the hands of the users, yeah, so we can already identify trillions of dollars, but down the road, what could that be ultimately? And so that's kind of what we're starting the process of building is a tech platform that ultimately benefits the users, the members.
What do you foresee the impact of AI on the workforce being?
Well, and this is one of those things. I think it's actually going to have a huge impact, and this is where we've, for the longest time, the belief, or at least before ChatGPT kind of came to the fore, the belief was that these autonomous systems were going to be really good at automating kind of the basic tasks. And then when ChatGPT came around, and along with the other image generators, Dolly 2, for example, we saw that creative work can be automized almost just as easily as some of these more basic tasks. So for a long time, we thought that the creators were going to be safe, more or less, from these kinds of systems. But we know that these systems are quite adept at doing creative work as well. So I do think across the board, that all the work, or work as we know it, can be very significantly impacted by these systems. Now, whether that's good or bad, I'm not necessarily going to assign a moral value to that. But what I do know is that these systems, like all other tech companies, are ultimately capitalized by our activity on these services. All the information and the content that we are streaming to them, that stuff is getting scraped up and used to build these systems. And again, going back to the basic premise of user cooperative, is that we people, we consumers, are the ones that are capitalizing these technologies. And in this market system that we've subscribed to for hundreds of years now, if you capitalize a business with your content, with your data, it doesn't have to be money. It could be anything of value that's used to make profit. We get to own it in exchange for doing that. And so I think just like any of these other systems, these highly autonomous systems that are meant to outperform us and most economically valuable work, we're capitalizing them, so we should also own them.
Do you think there's what might the risk be if we don't seek to build alternate systems that are in service to people? Do you think we'll see greater centralization of power, especially along the lines of tech? Or like how would you foresee that going if we don't start to introduce other kinds of systems at this point in time?
Oh, goodness gracious. Well, so I can answer that with just kind of a little bit about my background, what got me into this kind of stuff. I grew up. I'm a millennial. I grew up with movies like The Matrix and Terminator and Alien, which is another one which actually introduces corporate power in a very different way, not along the lines of technology. But I think that what these movies portray is kind of that central power that ultimately displaces it puts people in the back seat. We are more users. We are not owners. We find ourselves with a dependency on these systems, and ultimately leading to a complete and utter lack of agency in these systems that ultimately really have a huge role in our daily lives. And I'm just not sure that's not something I want. I think that if we want to determine our destiny, if we want to have some say in how the future unfolds, then I think it's important for us to insert ourselves now and to start taking the reins of these systems before they become too embedded, before they become so powerful that we're not able to do anything. So I think the time is now. I think we're at a crossroads.
I agree. We can no longer afford to do nothing until we are powerless to do anything. So I think we're in a very important window of time right now where we have to be building these things. And it's
Yeah.
interesting because you've worked on Wall Street, you've worked in Silicon Valley. What did you see along the way that made you say, I need to build things differently?
So when I was working in corporate finance, I did as you mentioned, mergers and acquisitions work, and my job was to essentially obsess over what constitutes fair market, a fair market exchange in the context of M&A. So and fast forward to Silicon Valley. I had a front row seat. Shopkick was a consumer app that was ultimately generating its revenue through advertisements, and so I got to see kind of front row how important the user community was to so I got to see how important the user community was to to the commercial and economic viability of the app. It was the presence of users, it was the data that they were contributing to the platform, and that was, and we've seen this on a much larger scale with the likes of Google and Facebook and all social media platforms that we know. I mean, it's kind of general knowledge these days that these platforms are pulling in data and making money off of them, off of it. But I got to see that, and so when I have kind of this background of corporate finance, that's one dot. The other dot was just seeing kind of how the economics of a consumer-facing app company that's funded by ads, how all that works. Seemed to me that okay, well, why isn't it weird that in this information age, which is ultimately capitalized by information, why haven't we seen more economic benefits at the very least accrue to the ones that are actually contributing the information to these platforms? And that just seemed very much off market to me based on my corporate finance experience. And that's where I felt, well, okay, what if we did this? What if we started putting ownership into the hands of the people who are capitalizing these technologies with their information? And that was kind of the origin. That's what I feel passionately about. And I know it doesn't have I think there are so many legitimate reasons for user ownership, but that one's mine. And so that one's where I just feel like, okay, it's effectively data capitalization without equity participation in these platforms that were ultimately capitalized by data. That just seems wrong to me. So yeah, that's the user ownership thing for me.
I love it. Very cool. And so the idea for this was born at Google for Startups. Was that it? You were in that program?
Uh,
Did the idea come to life there, or did you have the idea and then you went into the program?
Well, and so this was the idea was there, and that's what got me kind of into the Google for Startups program, which that was an abbreviated. That was not I wasn't there for very long, but that is something that they did invite me to incubate the idea with some of the folks, their community there. But at that time, it was the user ownership component was ultimately baked. I decided that I wanted to build a platform that was user owned in some way. At the time, that was partial ownership. That was like called a 50/50 JV between users and traditional venture capitalists or traditional shareholders. And so that was at the very beginning. And then I also had no idea at the time what was the appropriate application to launch that platform with. So I mean, you have the platform, you have the user ownership, but what app are you going to go to market with? Because it's as much as I want to say that people throw a bunch of money at articles of incorporation and bylaws. I think a product is ultimately what you gotta go with some kind of product. And at the time, that was a photo tagging app to ultimately train like a computer vision model, which was super, that was cool at the time. But we decided to simplify and go with a browser ultimately.
Interesting. So at what point in the journey did you go from a mix of venture capital and user ownership to full user ownership?
Well, and so this was when this was a couple of years later, I think. This has been a long process. The idea maze has been long, and so I was a couple of reasons. I started to go. I went to 100% user ownership because what I found just talking to people is that the structure was confusing. When you have a 50/50 JV, there's a lot more to explain. Ultimately, I wanted this to benefit the consumers. But I also acknowledge that if you do it the cooperative route, there are complications with capital raising with a cooperative. If you can't sell equity to an investor, you can't get a large chunk of capital in there, and it's hard to build that way. So that's why I originally had kind of the JV component. I went to user ownership, frankly, because I wanted to work for the consumers, and I didn't want to confound what it was I was explaining to them with a 50-50 JV. I felt like when you're kind of thinking about introducing a new concept to the world, you want to make it as clean as you can because consumers, we're busy. We don't have time to like dig deep and really, unearth the beautiful nuance of the ownership structure and all that and how that perfectly aligns with our interests. So I found it to be confusing. It was an extra layer of complexity that, quite frankly, I thought if it were there, it was not going to launch. We were not going to have anything. We were going to be too confusing. And it was also kind of in conflict with kind of where I was at in wanting to just be exist unambiguously for the benefit of the consumer. And then the cooperative bit came later. I didn't know jack about cooperatives. That was outside of everything I knew in business. I was in denial about cooperatives for a long time. I was thinking, what is this? So after I'd made the decision to go 100% user owned and controlled, let's be very clear here. Control is another thing that we haven't really addressed yet in the structure. But going to how do you implement how do you implement that? You can't do it by modifying an existing C corp or whatever. You have to. So cooperatives kind of came. I became aware of cooperatives. I was talking to my mother about this, and and she was a member of REI, and she got an email, I think, for their annual report or something, and she said, "Have you ever looked into cooperatives?" And I said, "Yeah, but I didn't think they were going to work out." But that forced me to re-examine cooperatives, which ultimately was a huge game changer. So really, we can thank my mother for this. Um, but uh, yeah, that's what got me 100% user ownership. Then mom introduced me to cooperatives, and then that's how I adapted the REI structure to create user cooperative.
Very cool. Do you have any reservations about handing off like full ownership and governance to a collective of people? Like, because essentially you somewhat then relinquish control over this thing that you've built. I have to think through that with TAO, right? The social media platform. So I'm curious, like, what your thinking has been around that. Is it going to be phased governance or is it still kind of in the works? How that's baton handoff is going to happen?
Yeah, and that is one of those things I originally went out with just like, no, let's just give it all, no phasing in of governance. And then one of the early members of all people um, came to me and said, I think that you might want to reconsider that. And he said, well, if you got 10 members and five of them can just shift the course of the company, that might be a problem. And I kind of agreed. So when you're just building it out, I do think so. I came around and put in a phased governance structure, which is operating right now at everyone. When you join user cooperative, you get all the economic benefits that you're entitled to, but we don't phase in full member governance until we reach 1.5 million members and $15 million of total revenue. And those are just round numbers that seem okay. 1.5 million, 15 million, 1.5 million members, 15 million in revenue. I just kind of did one of these. I did not really, I
Yeah,
didn't think, I felt
got it.
like that was a good enough, just good enough. Because I mean, no one's ever done this before. And I feel like that's just a solid number. Really, it's not scientific at all.
Yeah, well, and I feel like it's much easier to make good decisions if you've got 1.5 million people instead of 10. That looks very different. So, you can currently go download this, right? And what is the relationship between user cooperative and Surge browser?
So Surge Browser is, call it, the inaugural product that User
Okay,
Cooperative is going to build.
understood. And is that available for download presently?
No, it's not. So, one of the things with building a cooperative is that it starts first with the community. It starts first by building an association of members, which go on to provide for the initial capital needs for the company. So we start a cooperative by forming an association of members. Membership is free and open to anybody. And what we ask is that if people can, they chip in a few bucks to help us cover our startup costs so that we can go on to build a browser that ultimately brings the economics back to the members.
Got it. So how much capital are you raising and or how many members do you need before you build and release the browser?
Well, so capital is an easier question to answer. So I think all in, it's probably going to take about $15 million. Now, the number of members, it's the number of members that bring in that capital is where we can start building. I do think that, and so we've had members come in for a dollar, and members come in for 1,000 or hundreds, and so I can't say. I just I do think that ultimately I don't know. So I don't know on the member side of things, but the $15 million is just kind of another number that has been informed by market comparables that you can find on Crunchbase. I look at Brave Browser as actually a really good comp for what it is we're doing. And so I've just kind of, but they have a little bit more. They have other stuff that's going into their code that I think might raise the price. Might make them a little bit more of an expensive browser to develop, but still, I'm looking at $15 million, and it might be less because we're not trying to build a browser that has all these new fancy features. We are defiantly ordinary. We're just essentially trying to clone Chrome, because I think that if for me anyway. So this is one of the things about being about not really knowing anything and just operating kind of intuitively is like, what is it that I'm looking for? I'm not necessarily looking for a browser that has all sorts of different features to it. I like my browser experience. I am a Chrome user. What I'd like is just to get off of the kind of this train that we're on where we're capitalizing systems with our information but not getting ownership rights in exchange for doing that. But I don't necessarily want to change how my browser experience is. I like it. So that's kind of the idea, is that we just essentially we take the source code, we take Chromium, the source code, and we just build a user cooperative wrapper on that to create the Surge browser, which has all the features that billions of us have come to love and expect in our browsing experience. And I feel like if you do that, you reduce the friction to adopting user cooperatives products. And then we start with commodity products, and then we go from there.
Yeah, I love that. It's Chrome, but you see the direct benefit of it. Where
Yes.
are you cultivating the community for this?
All over the place. And I have to admit, I have not, I've just kind of reached out to people in my communities, and and this is, so I've got networks that span a bunch of different places. And I've reached out to people to join and contribute some money. So we've got a membership base that's all over the map now. We recently got some folks from New Zealand and Australia and out in England, which is pretty cool. But most of our membership is in the U.S. and I have focused kind of that's kind of just outreach that I've made, and admittedly not I haven't had a whole heck of a lot of time to focus on that right now. My time is very scarce, having to work as an accountant to make ends meet. But my other activities, like kind of call it where I've been focusing geographically, is right here in Colorado. So I have through User Cooperative, I've been a pretty active member of Startup Colorado, which is the startup community that serves, call it the rural bits of Colorado, which means non-Denver, non-Boulder. Although lots of folks from Denver and Boulder are participating in our network. So we've built a little bit of a reputation here, and I think that Colorado has kind of is a really great place to start to kind of create that initial density of members. I feel like if you know just again winging it. I mean, who's done this? So I'm just trying to I'm flying by the seat of my pants. But just building an initial density in a relatively tight geographic space, I feel like that is a good way to create a little bit of a center of gravity that kind of draws people in. But also, I've connected with another organization called Project Liberty out in DC. I just made a trip out there, and that was I feel like that was kind of a game changer, and kind of a bunch of different synapses are firing there, and they operate on a global stage. They're working on a people's bid for TikTok, and so we've now become part of their community, which consists of lots of pretty awesome organizations. And I've already started conversations about partnerships and collaborations there. So I mean, and they're super enthusiastic about what user co-op is doing. So I mean, it could go everywhere. And this is what I'm just doing is I'm just doing everything I can to put ourselves out there and say tech power and profits to the people. What do you think? If you like it, join and help us out. That kind of thing.
Yeah, very cool. So it's a little bit of a longer play, right? If you're building the community before you're releasing a product. And I'm curious, have you faced like accusations of vaporware? And if so, how are you handling that? Because it
Well,
took us 2.5 months to do TAO, and people were already be like, is this even real? And I'm like, yeah, we're like literally in the middle of building it. So just curious if that's something that you've encountered.
Well, yeah, I have had one person say vaporware, and yeah, sure. If you're, you know, I'm not even sure what that means exactly. Vaporware is like we're selling a schematic for a product. Yeah, we are. That's just how we necessarily start. And yeah, bring it on. We're vaporware. I don't, this is how we have to form an association of members to build our company. And you can make the same argument with any other company that's starting, that's going out, a seed stage company that's going to venture capital with a pitch deck and ideas. That's how this stuff
Hmm.
gets started. So yeah, if you want to, whatever, cool. Yeah, we're
Like
vaporware.
that
If you want to,
attitude. Cool.
if you want to say that we're vaporware and you don't want to support us, then that's your jam. And okay, we'll catch you later.
So is the 15 mil for an MVP, or that's like the full build?
That is the full build that includes advertising. So going back to the browser, the business model of the browser, we've got two income streams that we like to target. One is search engine royalties, and if you're familiar with how Firefox makes money, if you're familiar with how Google pays Safari $20 billion a year so that Google is the default search engine on their browser. It's the same principle. It's just monetizing the search bar, forging a deal with a search engine to pay to essentially share their advertising revenue that is sourced from people using your browser. And it's an enormous business. And that is not something, you just need to have a search browser and a partnership in order to make I think a pretty good amount of money there. And then we have targeted ads, which is why I'm saying I think I'm taking a page out of Brave's book. I think they've done a fantastic job of integrating unobtrusive ads in the browsing experience. And so that $15 million would cover that. I do think that integrating ads into the browser raises the cost of the build. So that's why I say 15 million all in. But to get a browser that has a search bar, I think it could be a fraction of that. But I also need to firm up that estimate. It's all kind of order of magnitude. At $15 million, I'm not intimidated by raising that across a large member base. If we can find 1 million people to throw down $5 for us, I think that's totally feasible in this day and age, and we'll have 50 million, not 15. So, from an order of magnitude standpoint, yeah, that's what we're looking at. But it could very well be much less expensive to get to that just a browser that has the search engine bar that we can monetize.
I'd love to hear more about your take on unobtrusive ads and what it is you see with Brave that resonates.
I like just how in on the desktop experience, you'll just have a little tray that pops out off to the side that says, "Hey, if you click on this, then it'll take you to an ad." They make money off of that impression, off the click through, I presume. Certainly the click through, and perhaps the impression. And then that's just kind of a little side. In fact, I have on the website, on the user cooperative website, there is a how we make money section which shows how those ads actually appear in our browser. That's we do make that available, and then on the mobile experience, it's just a notification. It's just something that just drops down, just like any you get a notification that somebody liked something you put on social media. It's the same kind of notification that just pops down, and if you want to click on it, you can. But anyway, that's the ad impression there, and that offers up a click-through revenue generating opportunity, and that's it. So there are other ways to present ads as well, like in new tabs. You can have that as ad space, but the idea is to not, you know, my hope is that we don't actually have to put ads into our browser, that the search engine royalties will be sufficient income. But hey, it's another opportunity to make money and another opportunity
Yeah.
for more money to come into the community that allows us to kind of uh, determine our tech, be more effective at determining our tech destiny ultimately.
I think ads get an unnecessarily bad rap because what we're seeing in like the social media space right now is everyone is having this knee-jerk reaction to advertisements on our platforms, and they're like, we're going to be a no ads platform. And the thing about social media is we know how that goes. They make that promise early on, and then they get those investor dollars and they owe some kind of return, and they're like, well, what's the best way to make money? It's ads, and then more ads and more ads and more ads. And what I think is unfortunate is that ads could actually enhance the user experience if we just listen to people about what it is they actually wanted to see. So if you only want to see small and local business, or you want to see ads from ethical companies or your local farmers or whoever, and then you have a direct line of communication there, it could actually be something that is like feeding two birds with one stone. So people like I feel like we have ads carry this negative connotation, but they don't need to. Maybe we just need to be rethinking how we are advertising to people and meeting people where they want to be met. So just food for thought,
Yes.
because that's how we're thinking about it at TAO.
Well, and that's exact. And so the way I look at it is like, you know, I think we start with the posture that let's go capitalize on our clicks. Let's get real about this. I mean, we're seeing companies making just a killing off of this, and let's bring it into our pockets, right? Let's put this money in our
Mm-hmm.
pockets. Let's capitalize on our data to the hilt. So I'm all for ads. And I'm all for, and because we're a cooperative, we start with this kind of let's just lean into capitalizing our butts off on our clicks, and then let's see the emergent properties come through. When we start having members that control us through electing our board members, which manage the company. So it's not we're not fully so we're just basically a company that trades out traditional shareholders for consumers. So they
Mm-hmm.
can govern everything that we do, and that means everything from who's the CEO, whether they want to fire me ultimately, or whether they want to actually change a line of code or introduce a feature. All sorts of emergent properties can come of that, which I'm not even going to begin to imagine what that is. I think that is, we're just getting into such complexities, but I do believe emergent properties can come that will ultimately help us tweak how that ad experience ought to be, and generally the collection of use of our members' data on our platform. So let's start with the idea of capitalizing on our clicks, and let's have those ads come in there, and then let's see how the members talk to us, give us feedback on how we want to tweak that experience. Going to your point, how we want to how we want to introduce features that perhaps in the news feed on social media say, do you want to see more of this or more of this? And then people get to select that and customize their ad experience just on the fly like that. I mean, I can see that as something that would be totally cool. But members are going to tell us what to do. That's what we're all about.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's powerful about a co-op or a DAO structure, something that has some element of community ownership, is that you actually get like real-time customer feedback in a way. And that's something that so often is like startup founders, like you want it, right? It's really helpful when you can get it, but you have that actually inbuilt to the business model. And it's just an absolute gold mine. Like, yeah, you build the thing that people want, obviously. So
Yeah.
with the co-op structure, I'm curious, what is the payout kind of system like? Is it dividends? Is it, and also how does it work if like, for example, you've got your people who were here from day one, right? Like the OGs, the ride or dies, the people who got in super early versus the people who come in later after this thing is making money. So how are you going to go about the payout structure for people who are part of this co-op?
So we have this on the website. So if your viewers and listeners want to check us out, we have a member dividends page uh, that you can access on our website that goes in detail on how we do that. But it's simple. It's just we distribute all of our profits and gains in proportion to clicks on our services. And no one gets any advantage if you come in early. You're not going to get any special advantage if you come in much later. But you do accrue more. The earlier you come onto the platform, the more you use. Ultimately, the more you get to participate in like any gains on the sale of our company. If someone wants to come in and buy us, and they're willing to pay a price that our members will accept and our members vote to sell, then the ones who got in earlier are going to get more of a benefit from that. But it's
Hmm.
straightforward. All economics go in proportion to the clicks on our services, and we've got all the information on our website about how we do that. And we also have our constitutional documents as well as backup to that, our articles of incorporation, namely, that specify how the economics are distributed.
Yeah, so usage based.
It's usage based, and that's what a cooperative enables. And so that's what's really important is that a cooperative, I just say consumer cooperative, which is what we are. We're just a customer owned business, but a cooperative is a structure that is unique. It is a corporate structure that dispenses with that distributes all the economics on the basis of transactions, patronage with the co-op. So, we just chose clicks, and we define what clicks really are. Clicks are really all-encompassing. That's just the shorthand. But clicks are transactions with a tech company. So we just measure patronage with user cooperative as the number of clicks someone has in a certain period. For whatever profit we make during that period, then we distribute it back to our members in proportion to their clicks.
Yeah, I love that model. That makes a whole lot of sense. With kind of incoming agentic AI, do you worry or are you considering precautions for how you prevent people from, I don't know, creating bots that run through and just click a bunch of things, but they're not actually using the product?
I don't have any specific solutions to that, but we are going to prevent that. We're going to find out who those bots are, and we're going to eliminate them from. We're not going to allow them to participate in our economics on that basis. And just as another note, user cooperative is wholly consumer owned and governed. So I had the question recently. Someone asked me whether we allow organizations to become members, and the answer is no to that. It's only people, natural people. So so that is also something that is written in our constitutional documents. So if we find a bot in there, they're not a natural person. They get pulled out.
Right. So search browser is like your flagship product, or it will be. Do you have other things in mind that you would like to be under the umbrella of user cooperative, or is that another thing where you're going to be taking your cues from the co-op?
So yes, short answer. We ain't stopping at a browser. I look at this, and this is why I'm leading with the people's tech startup and tech power and profits to the people. A browser is just our entree. That to me is it's a It's a technology that billions of us use every day. It's relatively cheap to make. The feature set is very well established, and we can move all of our stored value in a browser with a few clicks these days. So shifting from one browser to another is super easy. And so it just seems like a logical first product for us. And so I want to move us into go beyond a browser. I'd like to get into search. I really want to get into search. And after that, um, we'll just see. That'll I'll take cues from the members. But what I feel pretty strongly about is really capturing that kind of commodity technology, the browser, the search engine, and then go from there. Because I believe once you kind of establish that economic foundation, if you want to be competitive against big tech, they're putting billions and billions of dollars into perfecting their products. That's why we love them so much. I mean, that's why I love them so much. So, I mean, I use Chrome, I use Google. I'm a big tech user, um, and so they have these massive R&D engines that are capitalized by our information, and they are able to make their products really, really well. And so that's where I say, let's go with a browser. That's kind of the lowest cost of entry. That's our beachhead. And then we can monetize the heck out of that through search engine royalties and ads. And then we invest those profits back into user cooperative to make more services that people want. And that's kind of our equity story, if you will, for membership, is that is what we use economics to really take us into the next level. I would love to see search in addition, or whatever kind of if it's a search engine, if it's a chat service, if it's more kind of along the lines of what we're coming to understand as AI these days. It all depends on what people are using, what the economics are of that product, but ultimately it has to be a profitable one.
I um so I have a dumb question, which is what is the difference between a browser and a search engine?
Browser is what enables you to access the search engine. So the search engine is, call it a website, and the browser is what enables you to view websites. That's a great
Okay,
question. That
so
is not a dumb question.
so Chrome is like a browser and then Google is like a search engine.
That's right.
But Google Chrome just okay, got it.
That's right. Hey,
Got it.
great question. There are no dumb
Interesting.
questions. No dumb questions. That's a great one.
I believe that. I believe that. So what's next for user co-op?
Well, next, I'm just gonna keep doing what I can to, I'm trying to put as much time into user co-op as I can on my shoulder time, and so I'm going to continue really making a push to build our membership, with social media activity. I'm writing some things here and there, so it's kind of like I'm just putting out some content into the world, and just kind of doing what I can to build our membership. I have, when I can, I'm going to going out to seminars and other places to go out and speak about user co-op, doing things like this, doing whatever I can to get us out there, uh, become known, and hopefully drive membership. I'm going to just take every opportunity I can to find forums for me to communicate what it is we're doing, in hopes of building a kind of a membership here. And again, and forging partnerships and collaborations with folks where I can as well. I think this last trip out to DC was really kind of a game changer, and now I'm finding myself like, oh my gosh, I'm becoming more inundated with user co-op stuff, and just trying to figure out how to balance everything to make it work. But I'm yeah, just get out there and just do everything I can to communicate what it is we're doing, and hopefully get some more folks on board.
It is working because the last TAO talk I did was with a woman named Jay Friday, and she is essentially cataloging these 300 movements that are all based on like well-being economies or circular economies. And she actually knew exactly what your product is and has already signed up for it. So it's definitely catching on. Like the fact that she was in my ecosystem, yeah, I thought that was cool.
Yeah,
So
I saw her come through.
where can we find you? Where can we find you? And if people want to get involved, how can they go about that?
You can find us at usercooperative.com. And if you're into the idea of tech power and profits to the people, starting with a web browser, then I encourage you to sign up as a member on our website. It's free to do that, but and only if you can contribute a few dollars to help us with startup costs. And those startup costs are ultimately going to go into helping us build our membership, and then they will go on to help us building a web browser that we can give to our members. So that's it. It's really as simple as that. Oh yes, and if you're also really into what we're doing, tell a friend or two about us. We don't have any ads running right now, so sharing is would be really helpful.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time today, Matt.
Thank you very much for having me.